Oh my gosh, it's that time already? It's that time? Where's the button? Let me get this thing started. Let's get in here. Hello there, friends. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening. Whatever time it might be in your part of the world. Welcome back to the live stream. My name is Jeff Fritz, and today it's another Learn C Sharp with CSharpFritz episode. It's so beautiful and sunny outside. We're going to learn a lot about .NET Aspire today. We're going to talk about microservices. We're even going to bring in a little bit of MongoDB with Entity Framework. All of that's on the agenda today. I want to make sure I say hello to you, some of our friends that are out there. Right over here, I've got the timer going. We're going to do a little AMA for the next little bit, talking about all things Microsoft developer technology, Azure, Visual Studio, .NET. Let's discuss. Let's catch up a little bit, see what questions you might have, talk about some of the things that are going on with .NET Aspire as we look at growing that cloud native stack, and talk a little bit more about what's interesting you and what we can do here to make your development experience better. Let me say hello to some folks as I go around the horn over here. We're watching right here, and I've also got Tags app up in the background so we can talk to folks. Hello, C Sharp Titan. Good to see you there. Manoj is here on Twitch. How's it going there? Roman is watching from Austria. How's it going there, Roman? Is it Eder? Is there Adair from Brazil? Welcome in. Null Sheffo with a big wave and hello. How you doing there? Ken's watching on YouTube. Jay, how you doing there? Hello. Is that four F for Lands? How's it going? Hello. See you watching there on Twitch. Big Daddy McCoy asks, how am I feeling better? I am. Thank you for asking. Turns out, with last week's episode, if you're watching the recording, it's the previous one here in the playlist. Turns out I had COVID while I was presenting that. I didn't know it. I had so much adrenaline in me, and I was going and having a great time talking about Aspire and the tech and the things that we were building together. I got done afterwards. I was tired, feeling really lethargic. I laid down for a little bit, got up, and my wife said to me, "Why don't you take a COVID test?" And it came back within 2-3 minutes. You normally have to wait 10-15 minutes for it to come through. No, it was red, bright red immediately. Like, oh, guess what? So I took 5 days off there and recharged, recouped, feeling much better now. Thank you so much for asking. How you doing there? Good morning, Michael, watching on YouTube. C Sharp Dev on YouTube. Hello. Good to see you. C Sharp Dev asks, is there a lot of new things in .NET 9? Last time I used .NET was since .NET 7. So .NET 9 doesn't have a lot of new things over .NET 8. That said, though, .NET 8 has a bunch of new features in there. There's lots of new capabilities with the programming language that you're going to see and work with and learn about that are going to allow you to shortcut, to write less C# code, but it'll be more expressive of your intents. The end result of this being your code that you write, you end up writing less code. It ends up actually running faster because it takes advantage of new capabilities and new optimizations that are available in .NET 8 and soon to be .NET 9. And you end up with your code, your application, running faster with less code, doing that just by upgrading and using some of the new language syntax. Really great stuff. Really great stuff. Let me get some music playing in the background here, and I'll continue answering some questions. I've got Tags app up here in the background, so we can queue up some questions and discuss as we're going along. I'm going to go with the Stream Beats Synthwave playlist here, and I'm going to scroll down here. Let's start with this. This is called Shadowboxing. This is music that's DMCA free. It's royalty free. Listen to it wherever you'd like. Check it out at streambeats.com. There's all kinds of genres available. I just like to have some groovy music in the background here so that while we're talking, hanging out, and learning about tech, kind of fills the gap and fits the mood here. Big thanks to Harris Heller and his team of creators for this music we're listening to today. Can I just mention, what names of features in... Well, Blazor had a significant expansion of capabilities in .NET 8. I've slowly gotten confused on some of the language features. There's I would have to dig that up and take a look to be able to recite and give you more on that. There were significant updates to the Microsoft Identity, the security, authentication, and authorization platform that is part of ASP.NET as you build your applications. There's significant updates to the way that Azure Functions run if you use functions out there. There's been a number of updates to WPF and Windows Forms to make them run better performance, smaller, faster. Ahead of time compilation is now very much a first class feature that's supported throughout the frameworks. Not so much on ASP.NET, but WPF and Windows Forms applications, you're going to be able to compile with ahead of time switches turned on that are going to give you much, much better performance working through there. Yeah, there's some new extension capabilities in .NET 9 that are going to be interesting. I don't think they're a must-have so much right now, but they're interesting. Should you learn .NET 8 first or jump directly to 9? I would jump to .NET 8 because it is an LTS release. I would hold off on going to .NET 9 because that's not going to be released until November. The features coming in .NET 9 are an add-on to .NET 8. So in learning .NET 9, you're going to have to learn the .NET 8 things anyway. So spend some time with .NET 8. I think you're going to find that it's a very capable version of the framework. The stuff in .NET 9 is coming along, and there's going to be announcements and discussion of the capabilities that are coming over the next few months as we get closer to .NET Conf, November 12th, 13th, and 14th. That's our online conference. You're going to be able to watch it right here on these channels, even if you're watching the recording on YouTube, on this YouTube channel, youtube.com.net, on Twitch TV Visual Studio, and of course, all of the agenda, all of the notes, all of the ways that you're going to be able to interact are going to be available at .NETconf.com. Right? I think that's it. Yeah. I always get confused if it's .NETconf.net or .NETconf.com is the website. Let me see. How you doing there, Napalm? Hello. Space Shot says, I think you're okay learning C#.NET and ASP.NET Core now. Yeah, totally. It's not old stuff. Saying something is old that's 7-8 months since release, that's the Osborne effect creeping into your head. Don't do that. That doesn't help you. There aren't things. What you should know, what you should realize after 23 years of .NET development and releases, nothing is removed from a previous release. Everything builds on previous versions. So much so that folks complain, oh gosh, this is still around from way back. Nothing is removed. There will be a major version shift in order for something like that to happen, and that's not planned. That's not happening. So, let me. Oh, good. We're getting some good questions coming through here. Let me queue up a couple things here with Tags app, and yeah, very good. Let me set a timer here off to the side. Set a timer for 32 minutes so that we still keep track on this time. Let me head over to Tags app here, and we can talk a little bit about some of the things that you're asking about, and we can discuss a little bit further here, pulling it down off the big board of questions from YouTube and Twitch. See, it's right there. Hey, see, there's the Tags app. It's right there. My green screen's a little off center. There we go. Let me go to the first question that we got here from Data Goose on YouTube. Will Aspire support Valkey, or is there a special implementation with Redis? So there's a couple things going on here with this question, and let's break that down. Valkey is the open source fork of Redis. This is the fork that Amazon and Google sponsored because the Redis team wanted to charge money to the big cloud providers that were using Redis, making billions off of it, and not paying them anything for it. So Amazon and Google encouraged and sponsored a fork of Redis called Valkey. Valkey supposedly has the exact same APIs and capabilities as Redis. So will Aspire support it? Technically it does now, because you can add a container image into Aspire. That's a command that's freely available to you that you can use, and then you're able to connect in with the same the same Redis APIs that are available in all of your other platforms and work with Valkey. That said, when you add a Redis a Redis feature into Aspire, you can override the container name and tag. So you can say add Redis with container image name, and you can specify, instead of the default Redis image name, you could point it to Valkey and kind of override that. Still, Aspire is open source. There are folks that have built and submitted all kinds of hosting capabilities to plug into Aspire, and the Aspire team reviews and ensures that they meet the standards for the platform. Standards for the Aspire stack. Don't say platform. Aspire is not a platform. It's a stack. Adding wrappers around containers and services and giving them a nice API is actually really easy to do. And I want to encourage you to check out David Fowler's session from Microsoft Build. It was 2 weeks ago. You can find it on the .NET channel on YouTube. It's linked right from the front page of aspirify.net, our news hub that we have for all things .NET Aspire. In the second half of that video, David shows how he takes the mail dev Docker container and turns it into an Aspire resource that can be reused in other Aspire deployments and development scenarios. So adding support for Valkey, pretty easy to do. Some folks have already added support for Garnet. That's the rewrite of Redis that Microsoft did with C#. Garnet is freely open source available out there. There are resources so you can run Garnet, because it's Microsoft. It's real easy for them to reach over to the Aspire team and say, hey, how do we get this in here and get that integrated? So all capable and possible. The Aspire team is not saying that is not discriminating. They're encouraging more folks to build and add things. Are they going to build support for Valkey? They've already got support for 2 different forks of Redis. The current Redis version that the Redis team works on, and Garnet. If somebody from the Valkey team wants to build and submit something, I'm sure they'll accept it. Let me pick up. There was another question here. Is it possible to use Vue.js in a .NET project? Absolutely. In fact, there's even templates in the .NET SDK. When you install the .NET SDK, there's templates in there that will get you started with Vue.js interacting in the same project with ASP.NET Core APIs. Totally possible to do. Thank you. Space Shot with a link there in chat to some documentation about how to do it as well. Real easy to do, and it's a key scenario that the team has supported for 5-6 years, and it's been in the templates. So absolutely, I want to make sure that that's available to you. You're welcome, Data Goose. Glad to answer that. Your employer has decided to ditch .NET and Blazor over Spring Boot and Java. I'd be curious to hear why, C# Titan. That's a big jump. That's a big jump. I'd be curious to hear why. Let me see here. Let me add a couple things here. Static SSR uses it doesn't use SSR. It uses a little bit of JavaScript. It's not SignalR, I don't think. Yeah. Continuing over here, let me bring in these questions. This one from Jay. Wish they could improve static server-side rendering to not need SignalR. It's not SignalR, and and it's not interactive server. It's strictly JavaScript that's running out there, and it's pushing to the browser. Stream rendering is not using SignalR in there. So no, that's not a thing. The Aspirify.net website is static server rendered. There is no SignalR going on there. The administrative pieces of Aspirify.net are interactive server because it's an administrator piece. I wanted to get it reacting quickly so we could administer, update, and get out of there quickly. So, yeah. Server-side rendering runs really, really nice. You don't need SignalR for that. MizardX on YouTube. How you doing there, Mizard? Asks, is there any example of using Aspire with ASP.NET 4.8? OpenTelemetry seems to have a library for .NET Framework already. This is a question that tiptoes down a line of discussion that folks have had around Aspire to make sure that we're all at the same page. ASP.NET 4.8 is the previous generation of .NET Framework that was built and runs only on Windows. ASP.NET 4.8, it's 4.8.2, I think is the current version, current minor version, is built and runs only on Windows. And what you're going to find is it hasn't been, it's been maintained, but it's not getting new features. That said, it is not the target of .NET Aspire. .NET Aspire does not work with IIS and ASP.NET 4.8. Those are not supported scenarios. You could probably do something to make it work, but it is not where they want it to integrate. That said, if you built applications with Windows Forms and WPF with .NET 4.8, you could execute them from a .NET Aspire stack. You could do that. Do you want to? You could upgrade it to .NET 8, get a whole bunch of security patches and fixes, the ability to run on other platforms with cross-platform capability, the ability to put into a container, and a boatload of performance updates. Like, upgrading an application from .NET 4.8 to .NET 8, we should do some sort of performance metric that compares an MVC application running on .NET 4.8 to .NET 8 and just show the raw performance update, how much you get. Because the incremental performance updates for each major version of .NET 8, .NET 7, .NET 6, it is significant, 10x improvements on those. So it's going to dwarf the performance of your existing application. I strongly recommend you move off of that. And new features, new capabilities, ML.NET, interactions with AI will become available to you when you migrate. I have to encourage you to consider that. Let me catch up with a couple more here. Yes, interactive server is SignalR. Hey, Tarun. Hello. Welcome on YouTube. You think one of the people in management is not a fan of Microsoft technology? And in their previous company, they used Java and Spring. I hope they enjoy spending the 6 months to a year retraining all the staff or rehiring staff that have the new skill set and losing a year of productivity because they're porting between platforms because somebody doesn't like a stack. Good luck. That's going to cost you, depending on how many people are on your development team. A development team of 5 people having to retrain, migrate, and update all the technology to use the new stack is going to cost you easily millions of dollars. That is not a decision to take lightly, and I hope they understand the budget request that they need to have to your senior leadership team Evidently somebody approved that, and they feel that's appropriate. Let me know if you'd like some of us to have a conversation with those folks to talk further. Let me catch up here on a couple of these. Let me get a couple of this. Nope, not late at all, MK Slug. How you doing there? So let me catch up on 3 new here. Tarun says, I've been watching your streams before I was in Microsoft. Now I'm in Microsoft because, hey, that's great. Congratulations. Unesco says, some folks are working on getting Aspire to work with Python. Yes. So some of the big things that you may have heard the Aspire team talk about during yesterday's ASP.NET community stand-up, there's work being done to make it easier to start and integrate with Python. You can already start and integrate with NPM-based applications, Node-hosted applications. That's already in there. They're doing more work to make sure that .NET Aspire is not just .NET. They want to make sure that folks from other ecosystems can integrate and use the .NET Aspire tooling. You can certainly do that now by putting those packages, those tools, into a container and launching those containers from .NET Aspire, or starting an executable that is built with that other technology. You can absolutely do that. We have examples of folks doing that with Unreal Engine, building an Unreal Engine and orchestrating that from Aspire. So they pass in and open telemetry configuration, receive and get that logging and tracing coming out of Unreal Engine on the Aspire dashboard. Lots more capabilities to mix and match and get these hybrid types of environments you're going to see over the next few months as Aspire continues to mature. Jay says, sorry, I did not explain myself. I want to do what Interactive Server does, but only using... No, you can't do that. No. The closest you're going to get to that is, I mean, if you're using fetch capabilities inside static server rendered, why? Like, the annoying reconnection issue, well, if your server is missing, what are you going to do when you fetch? If your server is not responding and you try to fetch, what are you going to do? You need to put something up on the screen. What do you want to do? You can customize the reconnecting experience inside of Blazor. That's easy to do. What are you going to do? You have to write that yourself now about how to handle and manage when the server disappears. The server takes a bit of time to start up. It's restarting. How are you going to handle that? Yeah, you own the connection issue at that point. You're going to have to build back off and retry capabilities, put some sort of message on screen, unable to work for a little bit here, or be interactive. You own it. You can do that. What are you going to do that's going to be more interesting, compelling than what's already there? You can certainly hide and change the display of the reconnecting experience. You can add more retry capabilities into it also. All of that you can customize. You can put a nice progress bar. You can make it a little toast thing that appears here on the bottom of the screen. Make it appear like the one software developer in Mortal Kombat post popping up toasty. Sure, you can do that. That's all possible with Blazor Interactive Server today. I want you to make sure when you take ownership of that feature that you don't lose some of those capabilities that you get kind of for free in Interactive Server. So it's not a bad decision, but I want to make sure that you think through all of your needs in adapting that versus just literally setting a command on the second line of your file, of your Razor file. Nothing wrong with it, but there's a trade-off you're making, and I want to make sure that you're aware of them. That's all. Let me catch up on a couple more questions here. Null Sheffo is a Java and Spring dev, lately enjoying C# and .NET. Cool. Will I show the basics too in C#? Little bit. Let me see here. Let me catch up on a couple of these other questions here. Here we go. So, Carlos on YouTube. What about making cute desktop applications for Linux operating systems? You can totally do that. Download the Avalonia or Project Uno frameworks. The Uno platform, they call it. And you can absolutely build Linux-based applications using those frameworks with standard .NET. They are free and open source frameworks that you can use. They have generous support plans available. They have tools and widgets that work great with their platforms that are available for sale if you want to buy and use those capabilities, because they're a business that, in order to support the development of those frameworks, they sell other tools and widgets and support plans in order to support that. It's not part of what Microsoft ships in the box. That's their choice, and we're happy to support and encourage folks that are in the ecosystem that are building tools and features to support that. That's great. That's actually a healthy thing, that there's folks in the ecosystem building other frameworks to allow you to take .NET to other places. We like that. Let me see. Bopper-Ruski. How you doing there, Bopper-Ruski on YouTube asks, I'm curious about the SignalR connection's persistency when hosted in the cloud, raising costs significantly. It doesn't raise costs significantly. Are there really going to be people hanging on your application for hours, days? No, there aren't. Are there going to be additional costs around running a SignalR backplane? Well, if you have multiple servers and you don't want to use sticky server technology to keep sessions pinned to a specific server, yes, adding a SignalR backplane will cost you more. However, are you really going to have thousands of users connected simultaneously to your application? At its peak, .NET Conf has 10,000 people watching concurrently. And we had to use the SignalR backplane to configure, push, and manage the video player in the browser. Is your application going to have that level of concurrent applications? Not folks visiting within the same hour. I'm talking at the exact same time there are 10,000 people looking at your website. Probably not. So what I want you to consider here is, while there may be additional cost, it won't be significant when you start to need to manage multiple servers. You can grow the size of your server first before you need to start bringing in multiple servers. So there's lots of options to mitigate the need to bring in bigger management capabilities and growth for that. Tarun asks, can we make React a first-class citizen of Blazor? In what way? Tell me more there. Why? Most of the things you can do with React, you can do with Blazor, so why? Like, this is like asking, can we make React a first-class citizen of Vue? Why? Like, they do the same thing. I'm not saying you can't. What's it missing? What are you looking for? You certainly can do that, but yep, there you go. Linux desktop apps with .NET and Uno platform. Thank you, Space Shot. I'm going to grab these two questions from Michael. Yeah, Juan Van, I am. Hello. Add more shoelaces to shoes. That's a thing. Michael says here, I have a Blazor web app that needs to use some encryption that isn't available on Blazor WASM. It's generally a bad idea to do encryption in the browser on somebody's machine. I'll continue. I've settled on doing interactive auto app where the WASM calls an API hosted on the server. Good. Okay. Yep. Is that the best way to go? Yeah, I absolutely think that's the way that you want to go if you're doing some encryption. Remember, you're going to have transport layer security, TLS, or SSL connections, right? When you connect to your application. So you've already got a level of encryption on the transport going back and forth to your server. Whatever content it is that you want to make available, that the user is sharing, is going to be encrypted on transport. And if you want to encrypt it at rest, yes, do it on the server. Doing something in the browser is you don't know what you're going to get coming back from that. You're not guaranteed to have everything that you think you are in the browser working there. All right, continuing. Love the discussions coming through here. Unless you really want encryption on the client, there's if you really want, you can do it types of things. You probably don't. You want to the preferred way to do things that you want to be secured and guaranteed you have repeatable results is to do it on the server. Michael says, to be frank, this encryption isn't based on anything to do with IP security or PII. If I'm being honest, it's recreating a checksum. Oh, that's not really an encryption. That's more of doing a hash, right? You should be able to do that on WebAssembly to generate a hash. You should be able to do that. Uploading a save file to a server to do that interaction, yeah, okay. I could see that being a large task. But generating a hash, you should be able to do with WebAssembly. The encryption, I can't remember if the encryption APIs and libraries are available. It's generally a bad idea to try and do encryption, but generating a hash, you should be able to do. But yeah, I would need to do a little more research on this. It uses algorithms that aren't available in the WASM sandbox, AES, and something else. Okay. Yeah. Doing it on the server is absolutely the preferred way to do cryptographic hashes. If you're using one of those algorithms, you're going to want to do it on the server. Love the questions. Thank you so much coming through here. Great to chat with you and talk about the things. Today we're going to go through and we're going to talk about microservices. This is a question. I was reading through some of the posts on Reddit, some of the discussion that have come up during previous streams as part of this series, as part of the ASP.NET Community Stand-Up, seeing the questions that folks have and making sure that this series addresses and responds to some of those concerns that viewers like you out there have about how to interact with and use Aspire. And something that I want to make sure that you understand and you see here is Aspire is extremely flexible, and it's a wrapper that you put around your existing application systems. Not application systems. Because we want to enable you to orchestrate and make those things available to use inside of your system. We want to make it easier for you to coordinate, develop, and build together. I see a question here from Boparuski. We've been having issues with solutions with multiple projects and tracking changes in each of them in Git. Oh no. That's frustrating. I'd be curious to hear more about what challenge you're having there. Would it be a good idea to have the Aspire project alone in Git, but refer to another project? I'm going to show you a little bit of this model today. We think there's several different models, and I didn't finish writing up the pros for this, so I don't have all of that ready for this session. I got through most of the text for last week's session, catching up. I lost a couple days there because of COVID. There's more than 32 pages of 8.5 by 11 paper, so that's kind of an A1 size. Just the notes for this series, and there's probably going to be a good another 10 pages from this episode as well that we're building. We're going to get into this a little bit. There's several different ways to manage and stitch together your applications, and I'm going to show you how we're going to have a microservice running in one repository. So the comment that we had was, well, this business unit, this development team over here, they don't work with the rest of the group. Now that's a whole nother organization planning thing, but this organization over here, they build their own microservice and they manage it and they have their own database, and I want to be able to integrate with that, and it's in their own repository, and I want to be able to use that. I'm going to show you how to do that today. There's several strategies with that. You can just clone and copy it down yourself. You can set up submodules and put your Aspire project at a higher level in another repository so that you have individual repositories for each one of your components, and they're all submodules into that super project. You can have the various components build, and as part of CI, create and deliver a Docker image, right? A container image out there. I say Docker. I'm so used to saying Docker, but it can be run with Podman and Kubernetes and these other things. But you can create a container image and place it somewhere out there. GitHub has repositories available for you. Azure DevOps has repositories for you. Docker has repositories for you. You can place it somewhere out there and bring it in from there as part of your development process so that you get a continuous integration verified copy of things. All capabilities you can do. I'm going to show you just one strategy for how to clone and work with things from another repository and bring that into your project today. So it's not, I don't want to say it's a good idea. There's several different ideas. We don't have a grasp on what's a successful way to stitch together projects from disparate repositories and run them as a single development experience yet. We're too early in the life cycle of the Aspire stack to say this works better than other ways. Right now, we're just putting all kinds of options out there so folks can try these different ways and see what works best for their organization. So we need to figure out what a good fit is here. We're not sure yet. Hey, Cy Gamma, and I'll grab these other two questions as well, and we'll talk through. Cy Gamma asks, how does one deploy a Blazor app to Linux? Several ways. If you want to run it on Linux, you want to run it as a service. There's instructions on Learn. Take a look at the way that, and I'm assuming you're asking about a Linux on-prem server. We have instructions for how to do that, how to configure the service daemon so that it will launch and have your Blazor application running. You don't have to look for Blazor. It's ASP.NET. Look for how to run an ASP.NET Core app. There's instructions about how to do that to get it running either with Kestrel directly, hosting the ASP.NET Core Kestrel server, hosting it behind Apache, hosting it behind, why am I forgetting? Apache's HTTPD, I'm forgetting the other common Linux server. Can't remember it off the top of my head, darn it. But we have instructions about how to do all of those available. It's on Learn. It's real easy to do. Honestly, the best and easiest way to do this, put it in a container. Start up the container when your Linux system starts and just have all the ports mapped through and configure your container to automatically restart. You can also set up a service in the containers called Watchtower, and Watchtower will watch the repository the container is deployed to, and when there's a new copy of the container available on GitHub, Azure DevOps, Azure Container Repository, when there's a new version available, it'll automatically download, bleed interactions off of the one instance over to the next instance, and deploy and get it running. Nginx, that's what I was thinking. Thank you. Yeah. We have a UI, a DLL, and an API, and sometimes changes in the API bring stuff in the UI that may be complete or vice versa. That sounds like a development project team management consistency issue. We want to separate them so API and UI aren't that stuck together, but connecting them with Aspire in a separate project. You've got a different problem there. You've got a problem where folks are committing and shipping things into continuous integration that aren't complete. I wouldn't have folks publishing and sharing things that are incomplete and don't work. If you're responsible for one area of the application system, it's okay to merge and manage that in that area, that integration location for that bit of the application system. Set up a branch that is the API merge point for those features so that everybody that's working on the API merges into that capability. And then when it's ready to be deployed and shared with the rest of the application, run a pull request from that API integration branch into the rest. Having only 3 units like this, that's small enough. I would do a mono repository. You could certainly break it out into separate repositories and stitch it back together with Aspire. Totally can be done. I think it's overcomplicating when you've only got 3 units here that you're looking at. It's a little bit of overcomplicating. Can be done, but I don't want you to create more work that you don't need. I'll take this question from Null Sheffo to wrap things up, and then we'll get into today's discussion. Is it a good practice to use gRPC for back-end communication with an existing JavaScript front-end to ensure type safety? Is that a good replacement for T3 when not using JavaScript for the front-end, back-end, and the front-end? gRPC is a protocol. It's certainly going to encourage you to have good typing, strong typing interactions. Is it, and it's going to be highly compressed. It's going to be nice for back-end service communication. You can absolutely do that. I personally see gRPC and OpenAPI as interchangeable for folks. In my experience, and I don't have much experience with gRPC at this point, I see them kind of interchangeable. There certainly are benefits of using gRPC versus OpenAPI or some vanilla API that you write. Does it help ensure type safety? You're in JavaScript. Nothing is type safe. Like, it's going to help. It's going to help. It's going to help with type safety, but you're in JavaScript. At some point, you can shoot yourself in the foot with it. So, it's not a panacea. It's not going to solve and keep everything type safe at compile time. It's not. But it will help by helping to generate APIs that are and clients for those APIs that meet a standard. You can do the exact same thing with OpenAPI, or for that matter, GraphQL. You can do the exact same type of client generation. So take your pick. Which one makes you happy? Cool. I think we're about ready to dive in here. How we doing, friends? You feeling good? It's so good to see. How you doing there, Dukasoft? So I'll wrap up here with Tags app today, and we're gonna get in and we're gonna talk about the big bad blog. Hang on, I didn't introduce it right. It has, this demo has its own sound effect because it is the big bad blog. Emphasis on bad. Right now, it's still a little bit bad. Not gonna lie. The idea here was, and I even wrote a story to introduce the sample so that it was more relatable. How we doing there, friends? That isn't even the right one. Over here. The idea was that developer was out there and built a little web application using ASP.NET Razor pages because it's easy to do. Writes some markdown into a folder, and when it finds those markdown files, puts them out as a blog post on a web page. Piece of cake. We're done. Everybody's happy. No complaints. But our developer wanted to start to do more with it. Wanted to start to invite other developers, other authors, to interact and use the application. So how do we do that? How do we start leveling up that experience? And we're going to use .NET Aspire to take what was just a little Razor Pages application that we could deploy to a little web server, and we're going to gradually grow this into a full-fledged CMS that has a bunch of features that we're going to learn about along the way. We're going to learn about architecture along the way. We're going to learn a little bit about .NET Aspire, and we're going to slowly grow this little blog into something that quite frankly, could manage a regular publication that has advertisements and revenue and whatnot. And it isn't just our friend Arthur, the author here, who's ordering some pizza from this new pizza shop down the road called Blazing Pizza. Gosh, I'd love to know more about Blazing Pizza. That sounds like a fantastic pizza shop. Anyways, we started off in our first episode, in our first module, we learned about how the blog was structured. We learned about adding Aspire into it. Last time, previously on Learn C# with CSharpFritz, we learned about adding entity framework and building a migration service and allowing that to build and manage our database interactions and using Postgres with our database system. And I've heard this critique, this feedback from folks that whenever Microsoft folks demonstrate Aspire, we always use Postgres. Yes, there are a handful of database services that are available out there that you can use, and I even call them out a little bit here in the documentation. Look at how much I wrote for this thing, and I'm still not done. This is last week's notes, okay? There's a bunch of different database systems that you can use with .NET Aspire. Azure Storage, Cosmos DB, MongoDB, MySQL, Oracle, Postgres, Quadrant, Redis, SQL Server. You can use any of them. The reason that we like to use Postgres is it's really small, it's fast, and quite frankly, all the things that you could do with Postgres, you could also do with SQL Server. SQL Server, Oracle, they're more enterprise-grade, big systems that have a ton of amazing features in them. But for the types of demos that we're doing to introduce the Aspire stack, we don't need to go down into all of those things. We absolutely could do it. We don't need to get the point across about how to stitch some of these things together. So they absolutely can be done. There's folks that are working with them and are having good success. It's for the purposes of doing demos where I've got video recording and I'm monitoring two different web services here, and the chat rooms and all that stuff. There's a lot going on. I want to keep it as simple and small as possible, and that's why we use Postgres. The other criticism and question we get is that, gosh, you put all this stuff into one solution, right? Let me open Visual Studio and show you, right? I think this one is from, nope, that's the new one. I want 2. Where's 2? Yeah, that one. Everything's in one solution here. You open it up in Visual Studio. You're always using Visual Studio. You love the Visual Studio. Always using Visual Studio on Windows. Visual Studio, Visual Studio, Visual Studio. Yeah. There's a bunch of pretty cool tools in here that help us out. We'll use a little bit of Visual Studio Code along the way, I promise. But in your Solution Explorer, you have all your projects laid out. So we've got things like our app host, and there's my Postgres interactions and the database migration and the service defaults to do all the configuration. Do I have Zoom It running? Make sure I have Zoom It running. Right there, right? Right, and then finally, way down here is the web project. Like, okay, that's fine. But that's not how we work. We already heard Bob Baruski say a little bit ago that, hey, I want to break things out into separate Git repositories. I want to break things out because I've got separate project teams that are building and integrating and managing their own resources. And the larger application system doesn't stitch them together until the end. So I'd like to be able to isolate their work, put it somewhere else, and using a more strict microservice pattern, be able to bring together some of these things in a way that starts to grow a larger system and not just a solution. That's what we're going to talk about today. And I mentioned that we heard about this. I heard about this on Reddit, right? And I'll particularly go back into the docs here. What are you doing, GitHub? Dear Lord, come on now, friend. Thank you. And I'm clearly not done the notes for this one, but I saw this message that was posted on the comment about Aspire being generally available. This is how our platform is set up. A big advantage of microservices, your code reflects your organization. Once again, I'm not sure that that's ideal for everybody. You could end up being in a bad situation when reorganizations happen, and for business reasons, folks move around. Your application may end up no longer looking like your organization. That's another discussion. That's a process thing that's beyond the scope of this discussion. But each team has their own repository and microservices that they manage. I'm guessing that means Aspire is not for us. I'm talking about dozens of repositories owned by various teams that all deploy to the same environment. Yeah, that is a typical pattern. There's a lot to that, and we're going to show you how you stitch them together and how you can work with that architecture, that system management in Aspire, so that as a developer who needs to integrate and work with some of those microservices, they're available to you and you can coordinate and use them as part of your development process. Fingers must have been on fire. Let me tell you, Warm Peas. There's 31 pages of documentation here already. Like, when we're all done this series, I should publish it as an ebook. You'll have to get back into web dev a little. How you doing there, Bitwise? What do I recommend for hosting? Take a look at the big cloud providers. They've all got free, very inexpensive services to get you started with your first applications. Recreation Van says, hey, CSharpFritz, microservices are not the newest concept, and here we have Aspire just appeared and being propagated as what? Isn't it too late regarding Rapid Web 3.0? Here's the deal. let me go to that question from Rapid Van. Let's bring that up and talk about it. Because that is a good question regarding where we're going here. Managing, deploying, integrating, and pulling this together for you as a developer is really hard. Coordinating and making sure that your distributed logging, tracing, telemetry management capabilities work the same across all of those microservices, web applications as part of your larger system is hard. And the development experience coordinating all of that and keeping it all working together is hard. Aspire is a stack that intends to make that easier, to lower the barrier of entry for that, so that out of the box you have fantastic capabilities that automate and have a good standard for those things that you should be doing in your applications. You want to have resiliency in your connections to those microservices, to interacting with your databases, to having these things communicate with each other, storing secrets securely so that you can rotate and move them around inside of your application, have them transport from your database service into your web application, back and forth. Those APIs and keys and secrets that you're managing, you want those to be shared and deployed securely, and Aspire helps facilitate that. You want to be able to have service discovery between those capabilities. You can do that with naming, and there's features that folks have built out extensively on Kubernetes that do that. .NET Aspire has that in the box, and you don't have to think about it. It's just there. You don't have to go and set up other features. It knows how to interact and do those things. So we're only at V1. Aspire is only 6 months old. It's literally 6 months old. And for a single entry point for a developer to get their system started, and you're going to see how much easier it is when we get into this demo today, it's a pretty productive stack to help you as a developer build and have that full picture across your entire system, not just the application that you're working with. Vitok says, or Vitok, I'm not sure how to pronounce that on YouTube. There may be some cost savings with Postgres versus Microsoft SQL. Yeah, there are, certainly. Same way with with Linux versus Windows. Yes, .NET on Linux and Postgres is very affordable. It is, totally. Is there another feature to use like Mediator in C# other than CQRS and Mediator? Yeah, that's way out of discussion here. I'm not getting into CQRS architecture. We might we might talk a little bit about event storage and event-based interactions with the service bus. We might get into that in a couple episodes. That is way beyond where we're going to be going here today. Yeah, my mispronunciation. Easier abstraction above those. Yes. That's a great way to put it, Recreation Van. It's an easier abstraction that, with the APIs and libraries that are built and available for .NET, gives you a good jump-off point that encourages and through their standards helps with good behavior, and you're going to see that in a little bit here. Aspire is some kind of Kubernetes in C# that's underselling Aspire. That is one part of it. Kubernetes is an orchestration platform. Folks bolt onto it all kinds of services so that they get service discovery, tracing, reporting, logging, to manage all of those things. Doesn't come in the box with Kubernetes. You have to go and orchestrate that. And you've got lots of great options out there with Prometheus and Grafana and Loki. These tools are out there that you can use to stitch together all of those capabilities, but you need to do that by hand for your application system. It's in the box when we say .NET New Aspire application. Like, you don't have to do anything more. The telemetry capture and reporting and delivery and the name discovery, it's all there from the get-go. Go back to the first episode in the series. I need to stop talking about the intro stuff now so I can get into the actual part of this lesson. If you'd like to learn more, if you'd like to see me discussing those features more about the intro to Aspire, I encourage you to go back to episode 1, of the Big Bad Blog series. Great discussion. I'm happy to answer those questions. I need to get on to today's demo, and maybe we'll have some time a little bit later on to talk more about some of those things. But I really appreciate the questions. You're not entirely wrong, but you're not wrong. You're also not entirely correct, because there's a whole lot more there. So, yeah, Napalm has a blog series there about how difficult it is to set up OpenTelemetry by hand with .NET. And it's the same way with other platforms too. You can do it. There's a lot of code that you have to write yourself. It's just there for you and automatically configured and easy to work with inside Aspire. And we're going to get to OpenTelemetry in a couple episodes here. That's on the agenda coming up. So I really appreciate the questions and the energy. Thank you. That's great stuff. So I want to go in and I want to answer these questions about microservices. I want to actually show you how to do this, how to interact, how to integrate and build a microservice that is isolated in its own repository that you can integrate with the Big Bad Blog. I want to answer that, and I'm actually going to kind of take what we built last time, where we took our blog posts and we put them into their own class library over here, complete with their own Postgres repository for interacting with and reading and writing that content in Postgres, and as well as having a specific data type for that Postgres interaction, and moving that into MongoDB. And it's okay to have the Postgres thing still out here. I'm going to leave it out there because I've also got in here the interactions with my security services, the identity capabilities. I'm going to leave that in there. I'm actually not going to change any of these things. I've got database migrations here for setting up and interacting with identity. I think I can leave those there for now. And we're going to move things over and start up a microservice that hosts the blog content or blog posts in MongoDB. MongoDB is a NoSQL database. It's really good for hosting collections of documents. And let's face it, blog posts are documents. So let's add that into the solution. We can make it an option to turn on or off. Maybe you want to store in Postgres. Maybe you want to store in Mongo. We can cross that later. But for right now, I'm going to bring in and add MongoDB into the picture so we can use that service as part of this. Before I get to that, I want to wrap up a final piece that I didn't really show last time as part of that stream. That's literally what I just said, Michael. Last time, as part of the notes, I didn't get to cover this during the session. I introduced this common project here. Oh, that's no. Back to Solution Explorer. It was that key, right? So I have this common solution here that I added, right? It's, come on. No, do it right. Is it? No, I'm, darn it. Get it right, Fritz. Yeah, there we go. Right, this right here and this right here are common things. My post repository, my post metadata, these are the things that I want the website to know about and use, but I'm also sharing them over into Postgres. That's fine, and I started adding those, but what I really want is this bit right here, my constants. Check this out. I want to share the names of my services that I'm standing up and building inside of Aspire. Because these are magic strings. These are the names of the services that I want to be available between my APIs, between my Aspire configuration and my web service, so that I don't have to go chase around what these names are across my application stack. So I put them into this little static class as a couple constants. This is typical C# stuff with magic strings. Piece of cake. But I've added this as a reference into my app host project. And it's important that you see the actual raw XML inside the project file. Because where I included that reference to my common library of things, I add this little bit at the end. Is Aspire project resource. This indicates to the Aspire tools that this library isn't a resource that should be orchestrated and made available in that project's collection, right? When I'm over here and I'm adding a project, right, the name of my projects becomes available here when I say add project. That's a fast way to add references to things that are inside my solution. And this name is hanging out here as just a string. That's kind of annoying because I don't want it to be a single point. I don't want to be maintaining that string in multiple locations. So what I've done is inside my notes, and it's in the samples when you look at the save point, I can now reference the service names and say, well, the Redis service we're adding here is the output cache. I don't really care what it's called for you in the configuration. The name is in a constant. It's over there. You could see the string is actually output cache. But when I go into my web project, when I go to say add the Redis output cache, I can refer to that constant directly. Service names output cache, and it just works. There you go, Michael. Thank you. Yeah, it's I'm going from Postgres to Mongo to demonstrate and show a little bit of how you do microservices. So, this makes it easier, right, for me to have a consistent naming and sharing across my application system of here's what these things are. Okay. So, and I think that's the only place. Inside the Postgres data services. So in my shared library, my shared Postgres library, there's the name of the database. It's being passed in as a constant. When I say go configure the application DB context, and it's at a database with this name. Okay, cool. So that makes it easier to reference and do those things. But I want to build this microservice. I've already built the microservice. I don't have to go and I don't want to spend time actually writing this by hand. I want to show you. I just went and built a little API service that I started with the Aspire templates. So I have an API up here. I have an app host, just like we always have in Aspire, and my service defaults. My app host is very, very simple. I'm adding a MongoDB database, and inside this little solution, it's just database. It's only the one project, so it's just DB. I'm adding Mongo Express. Mongo Express is the tool that gives us visibility into our MongoDB instance, right? It's a web-based tool that lets us take a peek into there. And I added a database. So, right, we have our database server called DB. We have a database inside there I'm creating now called Post Database. And I passed a reference to that Post database into my API project. And my API project, I literally scaffolded this, okay? I literally scaffolded this. I created a class. I wrote some of this so that we have a title with a slug value that's down here that's being specified from that title, author, date, and a string block with some content. And because this is going into MongoDB, I set up an object ID called ID, right? But this post is specific to the API. I don't really care. It's here. Who cares? But then I scaffolded my endpoints. I had to do a little bit of work with this to work with my entity framework context using MongoDB. Yes, you can use entity framework with MongoDB. And this is the pattern that the folks at MongoDB want you to use. So, database context. Okay, if you haven't seen this before, I want to make sure that you're aware of how MongoDB can work with entity framework. Normal constructor receiving options and passing it into the base, but they want you to create a static create method here that takes in an iMongo database and returns appropriately the DB context options builder loaded up with MongoDB and the appropriate database name and options from your database context, your database client that MongoDB creates for you. Additionally, the collection of posts that we have here that looks exactly the same as we would with normal Entity Framework, we're going to put a toCollection entry on that so that it knows to use that as a MongoDB collection. All right. So from there, though, check this out. I can generate my endpoints. I had to do a little bit of finagling with this. The scaffolder didn't quite work all the way with MongoDB. I had to flip things over to SQLite, and then I turned it back over to MongoDB and updated a couple of the parameters to these methods, but works great. Most of this was scaffolded. So I'm setting up just a collection of APIs using minimal API to do the standard get all posts, get a post by a slug. It was get post by ID, but I want to search by that slug, that short name, that slightly different version of the title of the post, and go return that data or update, right? There's a put to do the update, and I've marked this with OpenAPI so that I get the Swagger information coming out of this. And I'm going to set up the delete as well. I mean, and that was all added in here, and adding Swagger and Swagger UI when we're in development, and setting up my endpoints, mapping right there. So if I run this, I'm going to get my little microservice that my microservice team might have built. They've stored in their own GitHub repository. It works with their Mongo database. Real easy to see and work with. So this is going to load up here, and I get my dashboard. And this is the dashboard for just those folks that are working on the microservice. I get my Mongo Express database perspective right here. And I can look around the databases that it gives me by default, or I can click into and look at the OpenAPI, the Swagger UI for this database. So let's create a post. Let's try it out. So I can start to specify some of these values here. Let's call this test post 1. The author is Fritz. Content, this is my first post. And I'm not specifying a slug. I'm going to let it generate the slug for me. Go down here, execute. And if I scroll down further, that's what the curl sent up. Here's what it responded. So I've got all the content there, and it shows me it was created. And here's, not that. No, let's go get it. So my slug was that. So I'll go down here and get, and we will try it out and key that in, test post, execute, and there's the data coming back. So my API works, and I can go over to Mongo Express, right? I can refresh this, and now my post database exists. And I can look into it, and right, I can take a look at my posts collection, and there's my post sitting in that collection. It's doing all the things that this very simple microservice does for us. Now, we could certainly get it hooked up so it listens to a service bus endpoint and has all the various test capabilities to work with that and all those things. I'm not going to go down into that. I want to show just the architecture of how to stitch this together with the rest of our Aspire system so that for you as the developer that's working on that integration point, you've got the website. Now you want to integrate that Mongo hosted microservice that's sitting out there in somebody else's GitHub repository, okay? There are several ways to do this. You can first set up, the easiest way to do this is going to be to set up a And let's start another terminal here. Come here, you. Right. I'm inside my project folder. Let me go into 2, right? So here's my list of folders. I could add a submodule here that brings in the API project, just the API project, from that microservice, right? Because that's really the deliverable. Those other 2 projects help to set up the developer tooling for that microservice team. But I could bring in and that API project as a submodule and kind of that spot welds it into this set of folders, and then I'm working like I normally would with Aspire. You can do that. I can also take that other project that's over there, right? So big bad blog, the post service, and I happen to have it locally here, right? And it's got these 3 folders. I can certainly have this build and deliver just the API folder as a container. When continuous integration has succeeded, have it deliver into a container into GitHub repositories that is the big bad blog post service. And that's a way that a lot of folks do integrations for deployment, right? Is they deploy the output of their microservice as a container so that it gets pulled in and deployed to that part of the application system appropriately. That's absolutely a way that you could go to integrate this. And adding in those containers, right, to the system here, let me go up to app host, right? I could add that container. Come here. You're not going to close all the things for me, right? I can do that by saying builder add container, and I can specify the name, the image, the tag, and I can also specify, I believe, with image registry, and I can tell you exactly where to go to get it. All right, and I can move that around so that it only pulls in and the specific tag for that's been deployed and up to date. Absolutely can do that, and that's probably the most the closest to producing and publishing artifacts that other teams can use way to do this. However, what I want to show you is you don't need to do that. You can actually clone down their GitHub repository and have it sitting here on disk like I have, right? Here's my big bad blog up here, and here's the post service down here. I can actually have this solution reach out into that other folder on disk and say, use that project. So even though it's not part of the solution, I can go and reference that and bring that in. There are a couple of drawbacks to this approach, and there are a couple of benefits to this approach. The first drawback is you're not going to be able to debug into that other service. You wouldn't normally be debugging into it anyway because it was published and managed by another team, right? In that scenario. Second thing is Visual Studio can get a little bit cranky with the current version of the tool set here in early June 2024, as far as building, referencing, and including it, because it's not part of the solution. It's not a direct reference, so it doesn't really know what to do there. You could add that project file as a reference inside your app host, and you could add it to the solution, and then you're now managing it and it's part of your solution. You can do that. However, in the spirit of managing things as a microservice and it's managed and owned by a different department, I don't think that's something that's entirely feasible to folks. We saw some folks said that they've got dozens of microservices out there that they're integrating and managing. You probably don't want to do that. You probably don't want to bring all of them into your solution. That's not going to be easy to do. So I'm going to show you kind of a low-level way to reference those other microservices that live on disk that you've cloned from their GitHub repositories, like I have here. I have the post service cloned, and it's sitting here, and I can run it locally, and I feel good about that. And I'm on the main branch, but I could certainly grab a specific tagged version of that and use that instead. You like my Visual Studio hat better than this one? These are the hats the GitHub folks have. I prefer hats that have a nice big logo in the middle. These subdued logos on the side, I don't think do much to promote the product here. It's more and more common to have multiple domain microservices that are used by multiple apps. Totally. And you want to be able to clone and you want to be able to reference those in many different locations. Yeah, it doesn't do much to promote, and that's kind of the whole reason of putting it on a hat. That's what the marketing folks will tell you. So you have a bunch of different options. I'm going to document and show the pros and cons of all these options in the notes. Well, I want to make sure you know they're available, and I'm showing one example here where I've cloned a specific tag. In this case, I'm on the head of my main branch. But like I said, you could clone v1.2, right? And because you're working with that specific branch and work with that source code locally so that you have that coordination. You can also bring in containers and so on and so forth. Let me show you the it's not really a trick. I guess it is a trick to get this working. So first, I'm going to stop the other service that's out there so that you know it's not out there and running. Okay? But I'm going to start to bring that into my app host here. So why doesn't it? I thought I had MO. I thought was the collapse all. Where is it? Outlining, toggle all, ML. No, and that's not working. Ah, there it goes. All right. So let's add a region here for, let's call this the posts microservice. Here's the deal. I need to add a MongoDB just like I have over in the other one because that's part of how they run things. For the larger solution, because I'm trying to orchestrate and show the larger solution, I need to bring that bit in. No, that's not what I need just yet. And even then, it's not the right thing. So I'm going to use Visual Studio to add new Aspire package. You can do this at the command line also. But the tooling makes this a heck of a lot easier for me to do. I'm going to bring in MongoDB so that I get... Go back. Aspire, MongoDB. There it is. The Aspire hosting MongoDB. I'm going to bring that in. Yep, I do accept. Thank you. Back over here, I'm going to call this... let's call this the MongoDB. That's not bad. That's okay. I can work with that, and it's not you spelled MongoDB wrong there, friend. Sure, I'll do with data volume so that it persists. I'm also going to say with Mongo Express so I get the user interface that I can work with there. And I think that's it. It's not Mongo Commander. What are you talking about there? Oh, I need to add database also. Yes. Right? And I'll call that Big Bad Post DB. Or actually, there's a name for these that I need to now keep in line. Here's where we may want to share some of these some of this code. Post database is what it's called. And that's what's in that source code. So I need to share and use the same name over here. So now I've got my Mongo database. Now I need to bring in that posts posts API. So close. So I will call this post service, and we're going to say builder add project, but I don't have, right? If we look at my projects collection, that API isn't in here because it's living somewhere else outside the solution. We can still reference it. We can still use it and give it that name. So I'll call it, let's call it post API. right? And I can tell it, well, where does this thing actually live? Well, it's up one folder. It's actually up, I think, 2 folders. Oh, thank you. And it's inside the Big Bad blog service. I think it's service, right? Is that the name of the folder? Make sure we get the name. Post service. Close. And inside there, it is that folder name. We need to put an at in front of here because this is a string. And we actually need to point all the way down to the CS project file. Okay, that's a lot. Let's put some carriage returns in there so that we can see this a little bit. Okay. And get rid of the semicolon at the end of it. Thank you. Nope, we don't have that, and nope, we don't have that either. Okay, so I'm referencing the posts API that I showed you is sitting out there in another folder. We're walking the stack here locally to go find it and run it. And then with reference, we're also passing into it, hey, here's the Mongo database that you want to use. Okay, so it's going to pass in a reference to that post database, a connection string for that into that API. Next step, we need to make that API available now to our web project so it knows how to go get it. So with reference, post service. Thank you, GitHub Copilot. I appreciate you filling in some of that code for me there. So now my web project knows about it. Before we go any further, let's make sure this thing works. We've just kind of stitched together a couple things here. Let's make sure it works. There is a catch to this. I want to make sure that you see this before I go too far into this. I want to make sure that it launches and runs, and then we'll go in a little bit further here, okay? So this is going to start up MongoDB. It's going to start up my little API, the post service there. Ah, here it is. There it was. Visual Studio doesn't know how to start that thing. See it there? There's the post API. It doesn't know how to start that. So it's gonna be grouchy there. Okay. So run it here at the command line. This is a point-in-time thing with the Visual Studio tooling. But you can run .NET Watch here, and it'll get things up and running and connected to that service. Okay, the command line knows how to reach across and grab that and appropriately launch and run that service. And there it is, down there, all right? I'll zoom in a little bit. So there's the web application, there's the Posts API. If I click this open, I can get to my Swagger endpoint. There's the Posts API. There's my Mongo database right there. Okay. The Mongo database. I'm sorry, there's the Mongo database right there. There's the Mongo server. There's Mongo Express. Okay, it doesn't have anything in it. So we will load content into this. But it knows how to interact with and get content and interact with that API. It knows that that's available for you. Would it be a good practice to have your service name in constants as well? Yes, I agree, Boparuski. However, we need to then share that constant across multiple projects, across the microservices. We could share that common project across them, right? We could do some code sharing. We could publish as a NuGet package and share that across. Absolutely could do that. Totally agree with it, with you on that. I didn't in time for this video, but you can absolutely copy and paste that name out there so that it is shared and referenced correctly across them, right? Either share that common project, once again, using either a submodule approach, or publish it as a NuGet package, a shared common NuGet package that everybody references in all their services, so that, to exactly your point, And it's a very good point. Let's centralize the naming of these services in one place. So, and you would have this same issue regardless of technology you were using. If you were using Kubernetes or Docker Compose, referencing and using those names and centralizing those names for your code to use is kind of a valuable thing. Service synchronization is a beautiful thing, totally. So I've got it set up, I've got it running, I've got it coordinated, and we're starting to get a bunch of services here. You know what I'm saying? Let's go back to the blog, and let's now set it up so that our post repository now goes and uses and interacts with the service that post service exposes. And here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to cheat a little bit here. My post service, right? We have the Swagger UI sitting out here. I can go grab that Swagger and I can save it locally, right? So if I go grab that and I tell it I want to save it locally, I've actually already got it saved over here for that version. But I'll just save it onto the root of the project here, right? And I'll close out of all this. We'll go back over here. I'm going to stop. So, right, this is one of those cool features that Visual Studio has that we can take advantage of here. I'm going to go add a connected service right down here. And service reference, open API. Don't mind if I do. Yes, please. I'd like one of those. Open API. Yes, please. I'm going to read it from a file. You better believe it. And it is not in the web project. I put it right there. There's my Swagger file. Provide the namespace for the generated code. Yeah, that looks good. Class name for the generated code. Let's call this Posts API in C#. And then there's an extra option that I need to pass into this that I want to grab real quick from the other project. Let me go find it real quick here off screen. And make sure that I have those notes. See, this is what I get because I didn't finish the notes ahead of time. Yes, thank you. There it is. So this is going to generate some code for me, but I don't want it to generate with a base URL because I'm reading it from a file. Don't generate with the base URL. So I'm going to specify where it's coming from when we go and load up this service. So installing the package, bring everything down, and when I go and look at, right, there's open APIs over here. Here's my Swagger, and it knows how to do all the interactions with all the things. Cool. We're getting there. I could use a URL. I shut down the service. And quite frankly, the URL that it's going to end up with isn't the same. So this is going to help make sharing and using that the name discovery a little bit easier. So I'm going to add a repository now that uses that post API that it generated for us. Okay. Here we go. So let's go back over here into, and I'm going to add, let's call this post microservice, not microservice repository. All right. And I'm going to have this inherit from iPost repository. Go ahead and generate all the things for that. Thank you. Thank you so much. And before this does anything, we're going to implement from that post API. I've got 3 methods here to implement. You don't really want to see me go and write all this code, so I'm going to copy in the content for these, and I'll talk about what they do. You don't want to watch me type. That's kind of annoying. You get to watch me type on the other live streams. So add post async, it receives that post metadata object. Well, we're going to create a post from that post API, the Swagger that we generated, that has author, content, date, and title, and we're going to call into that API and say, here's the new post to go create. When we have a slug, we're going to go say, get that post by that slug, and I do the same formatting of the slug here. And when it comes back, I'm going to convert it back into post metadata and return it in the format that this wants. Get a collection of posts. Yep, we're going to call that API's get all posts method. Order by, do skip and take. We could probably add skip and take methods to this API. That's a task we can do offline that we don't, for the purposes of this sample, don't really need to show. But I'm returning and selecting out the post object appropriately so that it's formatted as this little tuple that will return as a collection. Not bad. Last things we need to do are actually to wire up this API and this repository. There's actually some sample code that comes with the default Aspire application that we can load in here and we can use. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to reach into, let's see. Yeah, let's just do it right here. So we're going to add an HTTP client that uses the Post API. I called it Post API, didn't I? There it is. Right? Did I do? Yep. Good. And the base address is Post API, right? Remember, we declared the name of it. Oh, I did it. Post API. Fine. Right? That's the name of the service that's declared over here. Coming back to a little bit of what Boparuski was saying, it'd be nice to centralize that so that it was shared. And actually, I could do it with the constants here, right? I could add public const string post API equals, yep, post API, right? So over here, right? Service names, post API. Same thing over here. Let's do that with a little string interpolation. Service names, post API. And when I've got that consistency across them, great. And I'm going to add that scoped repository. I'm going to pull it out of the repository out of over here so it's not using Postgres. And because of that code we wrote last time that does the little bit of migration down here, I'm going to leave it out there so it looks at the markdown and it will it will get an iPost repository, which is now using our API, and copy that content in if there are no posts in it. Let's give this. I did it again. I didn't want to start it there. Cancel that bill. I want to run it over here. Sure. .NET Watch. Here we go. It's clean. I think there's more that we can do with it. We're at V1 at this point. So the team absolutely wants to hear your feedback as you go through and try this type of approach to build and work with your application systems. It's already done. It's up and running. And if I go through to my application, I've got my blog content. And I can click through and I can read the stuff. And I don't know that it's actually coming from Mongo. But it is. Because we're using the MongoDB libraries, because we're using the MongoDB behind the scenes in the API, right? I can click through into Mongo Express and I can see my posts and that they're created and sitting out there, right? I can go through and read more about this and dive into this a little bit. Right? There's the document. I can edit and do whatever I want in here. Sure. Right? But because I've used Aspire, and here's where Aspire is so much more than Kubernetes. Look at these traces. Right? Let's look right here where it went to get the one request. Look at that. We had a request come to the website for an article with a slug on there. It went to check to see if it was an output cache. It wasn't. So it went to go to actually get and render the data. Well, it went to the Posts API, and I can see that it took 66 milliseconds to deliver it from the API. When it was doing that, it took 2 milliseconds to reach into Mongo. I've got the entire flow here orchestrated all the way down into the database. And when it came back, it put it into the output cache appropriately. So when I refresh this page and we go back and look at more of our traces, right? Come down here to the end. Here I am getting it again, right? It's not showing me, but it just got it from the output cache. Right? Like, I've got the entire view of the whole thing. Right? Here's another request, and it was 500 microseconds. This is why I say, yes, Aspire is Kubernetes, Docker Compose, but it's so much more. I didn't write code to enable this, right? All I did was add a reference to my microservice. And as a developer now, I've got rich tooling that gives me insight into these things. Not only that, I can look at metrics on my API, and I can see how the requests are coming in and interacting with it. Okay? I'm not passing the service defaults into this. It's not... looks like I have some more configuration to do to get that. Nope, there it is. There it is. It's publishing properly. It's orchestrating and delivering information about the request duration, right? Interacting with this, right? And I can dig into certainly more. I could see how the GC is running over there. Evidently, it's not. The allocation size, right? How all of that is behaving. There it is. Active. Do I need to go back further? No, it's not showing me. There we go. Connection durations. Right? And so on and so forth. I can see all this data. I didn't have to do a thing. The open telemetry is all configured and available for us. And as developers, the thing that I want to encourage and make sure it is concrete in our minds is I didn't have to write this. I didn't have to remember, oh gosh, I need to write extra logging. I didn't have to write extra steps along the way to go and log all the information about those trace requests coming into my Posts API. My Posts API knows nothing about this. All it knows is how to interact with the Mongo database. I pass in the add service default so it knows how to publish and get and receive and get that base configuration. That's written and available to us. And we're going to learn in a future lesson how to customize that and how to add more discrete information so that you can wrap up and describe activities and add rich logging that you might want into here. But by default, it does the right things that you want. You might not want this right now in here. That's okay. Sure, that's fine. But eventually, your system might become large enough that you do have not just a website with a cache database and an API with its own database, right? There's 4 things it orchestrated here, and it's showing the interactions with. It might not be just those things. It might be dozens of them. But they're all here by default. And I can see all the details of those steps. And if there was more logging and more activities that were generated, they'd all be listed here. All right. Frank, you're right. Having that end-to-end trace is really, really good when you're trying to debug something across a complex system. So, Eric says, could you see this being used to set up environments for testing with mocks? Yes. So I've set this up so that it's using and integrating and bringing in that API that we know about. Totally. However, nothing's keeping you from swapping out, right? I have that repository method, that repository class that I set up over here that knows how to connect and do that interaction. While you're building and working locally here, right? I can certainly wrap these pieces that do that connection into those other services. I could wrap this and say, if you're in the developer environment, here's a stub that I want you to use instead. Sure. The goal of using Aspire is we want you to use as few stubs as you need to. And what I showed you here is you don't need to use a stub. You don't need to. You could. But by doing it this way, I brought in the real code from that other repository that was managed in its own Aspire configuration so that they have that great interaction with MongoDB that they can see and orchestrate and work with in that project, in that team. When they publish and make stuff available, I've pulled in a certain version, I've added it in here in the same way that it would need to be included and orchestrated to be consumed for use in production. This base address, while it's pointing to a constant here, well, that constant in the production space is going to be a container that's running somewhere else. A container that's published and deployed by somebody else. And that's okay. That's okay that it comes from somewhere else. But the point is, you're able to bring it in and orchestrate and choose when you want to use it. I've got about 10 minutes left. I want to make sure that I also show you that bringing in this post service, right? It returns a project resource. You can swap this out so it brings in just a connection string instead. We can do things here like say builder, right? Is it? I'm gonna forget where this is. Come on now. Where is it? It's not configuration. I'm forgetting where it is. I'm forgetting where the check is because I didn't do this and I've gone off. I've gone off the script here. Thank you. I know. Execution context. That's what it is. Over here. There it is. Is run mode or is publish mode? Run mode is the mode that you're running your app host in. And that's only as a developer here locally on your workstation. Okay? The other mode is publish mode, where this app host isn't being used to actually run things, but it's being used to be analyzed to publish. In that scenario, you want it to do something else. Okay? And now I've gone, right, builder, add project, right? There it is. In that case, right, I want to say builder add connection string, and it goes to wherever. Okay. And I don't have this quite right. Let me do some tinkering because, like I said, I've gone a little bit off here, but you would want to include the post service when it's actually running as a service, or in production, you're adding a connection string that's over to the other API service. So you have that option available. I'm not demonstrating it very well here, but I will get that into the notes appropriately at the end of this. Yeah, it's not the same return type. One was returning a connection string, and one was returning a project that it was going to reference. And I didn't quite have that right. So, let me see here. Let me catch up. C# Dev asks, did I start this project from scratch because this is your first time you've watched in a long time? Yes, we started this project. We're on episode 3. It was about a month ago because we took a week off for build. You can go back to episode 1 and you can see where we started from and how this has evolved and how we're teaching this. Here's the repository. If you're watching the recording, the repository for the Big Bad blog sample is in the description just below, so you can click through there and get to it. And in the notes for episode 3, right? Episode 3. I'm not done writing the notes yet at the time of this recording, but when you watch this, there is a link to the post service that contains that MongoDB post service. It's in another repository. It's a completely isolated solution. It uses its own database. It's even built with Aspire so that that team can work locally in their place with their connection and their configuration and their standards here, isolated from the rest of the project. So I want to make sure that I'm emulating a real-world microservice team collaboration effort. All right. I had it as a var type, and it's not quite right there. I'll get it right before and in the notes for you. Yeah, there's a handful of Aspire episodes you can go back to on this playlist on the .net YouTube channel, right? So if we go YouTube.com, .net, is it playlist? It'll get me right into the playlist. Yeah, there we go. Hey, look, we're live right now on .net. Who knew? And if you scroll really far down here, because this show has been on for a couple years now, go into the Learn C# with CSharpFritz playlist. Hey, I know that guy. Hello. Man, I was young. And you can see here introducing .NET Aspire. And you can jump right to that first episode in the playlist. I will share that link in chat for those of you that want to go back. And you can see next week's episode. I've already telegraphed. I've already got it listed here, so you can save the date, put it on your calendar, put it on your smartwatch so you get the notification when we're going live. Next week, we're going to talk about actually doing continuous deployment and shipping this thing, getting it running out in a production space. All right. All of that is coming up. All of that is next week. I've got a handful more episodes that I've got planned for this that we're going to build and work with. It's a lot of fun to write these episodes, to work with you, to build and share what's going on with Aspire, and to teach some of these architecture concepts, to discuss how these pieces fit together, and show you, and well, not be aspired, be inspired, so that you can try out new things. We're going to bring in an email service at some point in here. That's going to be part of this. We're going to review our friend David Fowler's demo where he showed how to build your own email service. We're going to include that as part of this. We're going to introduce and bring in a service bus with a worker service that sits out there and creates thumbnails for us. We'll add that into the mix. And those of you that have watched the Aspirify.net series on my other live streams, you've seen how we do that, and we're going to have some fun building that here live on stream. So lots that we can do with this. It is a ton of fun to stitch these pieces together and get that feeling of a single point of entry to build and run an entire system, not just our application, but our entire system. We, at the command line, ran .NET Run once, and we got our microservice running, our MongoDB service running, our Postgres database running, our Redis cache running, and connecting and interacting between all those services, right? to set up and manage all those things with Docker, or to have them as different services running natively on your Windows, Mac, or Linux workstation is a lot of work. But Aspire coordinates all of them, sets up all the telemetry, all the distributed logging for us, and makes it easy for you to do the right thing and get the right information out of it, so that not just you as a developer get that information, but as we're going to see next time, how it publishes and puts it into your operation team's hands so that they can use the same information you have in production to take a look at how the application is running. All right? Big thanks. Appreciate it, friends. I appreciate you tuning in. I'll answer just a few more questions here as we wrap up and close things down here. Let's see. Mohammed Reza asks, how do I compare Aspire to Dapper? Dapper is different. Aspire coordinates and runs services. Dapper coordinates and does some of the plumbing and scheduling, connecting between some of those things. You can bolt Dapper onto Aspire, and Aspire actually makes Dapper a heck of a lot easier to work with. I'll take a note, and that'll be something we talk about in a future episode as well. C# Dev asks, am I going to be using SMTP for the email services? Yes, indeed. And I'll even show you how to use it with SendGrid. The folks at Twilio have the SendGrid service available. I'll show you how to use it with that as well. Happy to answer the questions. That's what I do here. Aspire uses a proxy between services locally. Yes, it's different, but similar. It is. And some of that under the covers things about how Aspire works locally. Quite frankly, for us as developers, you don't need to know, but you're welcome to go and see how the Aspire architecture all stitches these things together underneath the covers. For us as developers, it's simplified so much and makes it easier for you to publish and deliver your applications to the production space. And that's what we're going to talk about next time. Thank you so much for tuning in. It's been so much fun writing code with you, building, talking about the Big Bad Blog. That's not the right song. That is. If you're watching on YouTube, there's other videos in this series. There's other great videos from the .NET team. I encourage you to check out the Aspire videos from Microsoft Build. Check out yesterday's .NET ASP.NET Community Stand-Up. It's the stand-up from July 4th. The Aspire program managers were on, and they were talking about some of the cool features that are in there and some of the things that they have planned, answering some questions about it. Was a great time. Those of you that are on Twitch, let's get ready for a raid. Let's see who else is out there streaming, doing something cool with technology out there that we can connect to, have some fun. And you know what? Somebody we haven't raided that I want to support, that's very positive, upbeat, and teaching folks. They're hosting, I believe they're hosting a game jam. Yeah. This is the Captain Coder. We're going to go and raid. And here we go. Thank you so much for joining us. Make sure you check out the other videos we have on the .NET channel over there on YouTube. Tune in on the Visual Studio channel here on Twitch. There's all kinds of live shows that we have available that you can talk to the program managers, the engineers, the folks that make Visual Studio, .NET, the Azure developer tools. They come and hang out on these streams all throughout the week. I want you to make sure that you connect with them and see more about what's going on. And check out our other videos. There's great training videos out there that'll get you up to speed on all kinds of topics, including .NET Aspire. Get ready to say hi to my friend, the Captain Coder. It's been a pleasure chatting with you here on Twitch. If you're watching on YouTube, have a fantastic rest of your day. And if you're on Twitch, get ready to say hello. I wish all of you good health and good coding. Take care.